Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Sirhan on X, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. Hope everyone had a wonderful 25th of November and the calendar year 2024. Jay, productive day today. Got my job out of the way. Now I'm here doing this. Getting ready to watch the big Monday night game coming up between Baltimore and the Chargers. But lots to get to before I get to that. Full slate of sports over the weekend. Good stuff. Hope everyone had a wonderful 3-day weekend. Happy Victory Monday to all that celebrate in the college and NFL world. I'm gonna get right down to it here real quick. Biggest one of the day here, of course, was San Francisco getting demolished by Green Bay. Jordan Love did anything and everything he wanted to. Question I had is, who the heck played for San Francisco? I mean, Brock Purdy was out. I mean, of course, Brandon Ayuk's out for the year. You have, what's his name? Sorry, I can't think. Nick Bosa's out. Davis Ward was out. Sorry, I can't think straight right now. But I don't know who the heck played for San Francisco, because Green Bay just did everything they wanted to. It was a great win for Green Bay. Staying in the NFC North hunt with Minnesota and Detroit. Of course, Detroit is just absolutely, Minnesota's playing out of their minds right now. But good win for Green Bay at home. San Fran, look, I believe their playoff probability right now is at 18%. Far cry from what it was a couple weeks ago. And it's basically not good. We consider the fact that they were basically start to finish from the top of the NFC last season. And of course, they were derailed by injuries, which didn't help. But, hopefully they can get themselves on track here. Still a chance to win the NFC North, but it's still a ways to go. Shocker in Washington. I couldn't see this one coming. It was Dallas over Washington. But then again, we have Cliff Kingsbury as your offensive coordinator. You shouldn't be surprised, because Cliff Kingsbury is the same reason why he was ran out of Arizona and why Arizona just hit the traps, because Cliff Kingsbury couldn't call a game to save his life. And basically the play calling for most of the game was absolutely atrocious. Dallas has basically played with a nothing to lose attitude. Kudos to the Cowboys for a solid road win. Of course, winning games in the division is always big. Of course, a highlight was, of course, Cavante Turpin with that Madden-like kickoff return for a touchdown where he pulled back, spun around, and ran it to the end zone. It was a good, and of course, Jaden Daniels throws a wild play to pass to Terry McLaurin, who goes underneath and finds a way to the end zone. But then, of course, Austin Seibert blows the extra point, and basically they tried the onside kick, and that was returned for a touchdown. But basically, Washington's defense decided not to show up, because when it came down to it, the second half, the defense just let Dallas did anything and everything they wanted after halftime. I heard a lot of things about Jaden Daniels. People right now starting to call him a bust or whatever. Whether Washington was on the fraud watch. Yeah, mind you, Washington, nobody even pegged Washington as a title contender. That's what I'm trying to figure out, why people want to call him a fraud. I mean, their ceiling was probably win the NFC East. That was not really saying much, because some of the better teams are in the other divisions. But Washington, nobody thought Washington would win 7 games, period. And they're at 7-5 right now. They're doing something right. To put Washington in that so-called fraud watch, I think is absolutely asinine and just absolutely wrong. So, but kudos to Dallas on the big road win. Always, they're not going to make the playoffs, but they're going to be a spoiler for a couple teams, because they still have guys in the team that can ball on both sides. But Washington, not necessarily a good loss moving forward. May derail their playoff chances, because it's likely the NFC North is going to send 3 teams. We're talking about Detroit, Green Bay, and Minnesota. So they're on the outside looking in here a little bit. Of course, speaking of Minnesota, they got the big win in Chicago. Weird way to end the game for Minnesota. Regulation for Minnesota until they managed to win it in overtime. Sam Darnold was perfect in the overtime period. If you have TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison on your fantasy teams, kudos. They balled out. I mean, 2 targets there for Darnold opposite Justin Jefferson. But, kudos to the Bears defense to keep Justin Jefferson in check, which is something that never happens. But, Addison stepped up. Hockenson stepped up. Basically, the one thing they have going for them, 4 of their next 5 games are at home. So, they're in the mix for the NFC North title against Detroit, who, speaking of the Lions, just find ways to win. I mean, they're 10-1. They're doing something right. I'm not ready to anoint them the NFC pick to come out of the Super Bowl yet because I don't know enough. But I'll just leave it as it is, simply because NFC is still a crapshoot in the middle of the NFC. But Detroit right now, they're doing anything and everything they want. I mean, last couple of weeks they did it with offense. This week they did it with defense, albeit against a less than stellar Indy team that doesn't bring much to the table on offense. But big win for Detroit as they try to stay up ahead of Minnesota and Green Bay. I mean, think about it. One team's 10-1, the other one's 9-2, the third one is 8-3. That division is about to get a little crazy here down the stretch. Of course, in the NFC South, it was Tampa Bay over the Giants. I said all along, Baker Mayfield is, from last year coming into this year, playing probably the best ball of his career. Got Mike Evans back, which helps him out a lot. But Bucky Irving was the difference maker. If you have Bucky Irving on your fantasy team, kudos. 151 total yards and a touch. Got you some fantasy points if you had him on your roster. For the Giants, you can't blame this on Daniel Jones because he's no longer on the roster. I mean, Tommy DeVito, you shit the bed. That's Tommy DeVito. I mean, that's what he did yesterday. He shit the bed. I mean, pardon my language, but that's what he did. And the Giants, well, your best bet is just to tank at this point. And of course, the one everyone's going crazy over was Kansas over Carolina. I mean, right now, I said all along, Kansas is destroying the league. A lot of you guys in Kansas are pushing the panic button. I won't, because you guys are going to be just fine. You're getting reinforcements back here soon with Isaiah Pacheco, Charles Omaninu, and potentially Hollywood Brown. So you're going to get key pieces coming back. Maybe you can find a way to snag a corner opposite Trent McDuffie, because maybe that's a bit of a weakness of anything. But Kansas is fine. They're 10-1. They're going to still hold on to the number 1 seed, and they're going to, at least be the AFC representative in the Super Bowl. Everybody needs to calm down with Kansas. Not playing the best ball, I understand it. But let's remind people, you guys have been in so many big games in Kansas that this is bound to happen. I mean, I've seen this happen with, the New England Patriots during their dynasty run. I've seen this, even with Michael Jordan's Bulls and during their 6 titles in 8 years, when they had regular season games when they looked like they were not going to amount to anything. They have listless performances. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. Everybody in Kansas needs to settle down. They're going to be fine. Next up is one here. Actually, battle for the last spot in the AFC is, of course, between Denver, Indy, Miami, and Cincinnati. Denver, I think, put a little bit of a stranglehold yesterday when they just beat the Raiders. Right now, this Denver defense is just playing together and playing well. I mean, granted, it's the Raiders, but they've done this to a lot of teams this season. Of course, last week, they just basically put the clamps on Atlanta. Bo Nix is starting to play very, very well. I mean, I tip my hat up to him. I mean, he's not playing like a rookie. He's played like a guy who's been in the league for a while. 2 touchdown passes to Cortland Sutton. And basically the interception by Brandon Jones, and they basically sealed it. I mean, the second half, the Raiders didn't even show up. Of course, the sad part was Gardner Minshew got hurt and apparently busted his collarbone, out for the season. Get well soon. But looks like Denver is going to hang on to that last wild card spot in the AFC, unless someone like Miami or Cincinnati just turns on the afterburners. I was holding out hope for those of you in Cincinnati that it would be in that Week 17 matchup, Denver and Cincinnati for the last wild card spot. Looks like you're not going to come down to it because you're playing Pittsburgh Sunday, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck because you're going to need it. But Denver's playing too well right now. I think they find a way to get that last seed of the AFC unless there's a total collapse. But the way they're playing right now, it's hard to see it. Especially when you consider the other teams, Miami, Indy, and Cincinnati, are just too inconsistent to try and close a gap on Denver. And of course, the Sunday night tilt, maybe we have a new player in the MVP conversation, a fella by the name of Saquon Barkley, who just ran wild. If you have Saquon Barkley in your fantasy points, you're the MVP. Because I'll tell you this right now, the MVP votes just got real interesting when this happened, and everybody's talking about Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, obviously. Might as well add Saquon Barkley to the mix. 300 yards from scrimmage. I mean, what the hell are you going to say? Right now, you think the Giants wish they didn't let him walk? I mean, they let him walk to a division rival, and look what's happened. Philly is 8-2. They just dog walked the Rams. You know, look like we're fixing for a potential Detroit-Philly NFC championship game matchup. I'm not going to count my chickens before they hatch. But Philly's looking very good now, and they made a major statement last night. So that was my Sunday tilt. I more focused this time on the playoff games, the playoff teams, because that's what we're headed for right now. Of course, the big one tonight is Harbaugh versus Harbaugh. And I got Harbaugh. Of course, it's the Ravens and the Chargers. I can't see Baltimore's offense just laying an egg for 2 straight weeks like they did last Sunday at Pittsburgh. I think they come out with a bit more vengeance. I think a bit of a flaw was exposed by the Chargers, but if you can attack them, you can get them like the way Cincinnati did. I think Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry bounce back. The weapons, I think, will bounce back. Baltimore, I think, has a lot more to play for. When you consider after Pittsburgh's loss to Cleveland, they're going to be more up into it so they can compete for the AFC North crown. I think Baltimore finds a way to get the job done on the road. I think this is going to be a pretty darn good one. I think it'll come down to a 4-point difference either way, but I'm taking Baltimore on the road. Big news here in Cincinnati. It's, of course, the trade Jonathan India and a couple of junk heads to Kansas City for Brady Singer. Jonathan India really touched the Reds Nation and the fans here in Cincinnati. Very beloved, well accomplished here for a short term. But there's a blood clot of infielders here in Cincinnati, especially we talk about the talent pool, and somebody had to be the odd man out, and unfortunately it was Jonathan India. But a heck of a pickup, another bat to help out Bobby Witt Jr. over there in Kansas City. Of course, the Reds needed an extra pitcher. Now, of course, I don't know if Brady Singer's going to put up the same numbers here as he did in Kansas City with his ERA because he's playing at a hitter-friendly ballpark, which is known as Great American Ballpark. But I believe he'll help because he's going to give him some innings in the starting rotation. I believe he will help solidify it a little bit. You know, how good is he going to? Will they be? You know, who knows? You know, I wouldn't put it past the Reds to screw it up. But I'll say this. They're making the right moves right now. And when they acquired, of course, when they hired Terry Francona, it seemed like they were ready to take the move in the new direction and start to get serious. Let's see where all this goes. But you guys over there in Kansas, you got a good one on Jonathan India. We here in Cincinnati we just want to say, take good care of him. He's a hell of a player, but he's right. Not nice. Bat to that lineup, especially the guys that cover Bobby Witt Jr., the guy you can't really pitch around, especially the leadoff spot, where when he was leading off, he was one of the better ones on the Reds at the time. So, good luck, Jonathan India. We're going to miss you here, but welcome aboard, Brady Singer. College football weekend. You know, a couple big ones here. Of course, the biggest statement made by Ohio State. I mean, they just put the clamps on Indiana. Probably the best defensive game Jim Knowles coached all season long. I mean, they just put the clamps from start to finish. I mean, eight sacks, 5 QB pressures, extra hits. Will Howard played a very, very sound, solid, efficient game. Offense clicked on all cylinders, did anything and everything they wanted to. Major statement was made. You know, hands down the number 2 team in the nation right now behind Oregon. Basically locked it. Of course, now we're going to find out where all this is going to be because, of course, the college football rankings are going to come out here the next, I think it's tomorrow. I don't, it'll be too much of a shakeup. But Ohio State's probably going to hang firm at number 2. Interesting to see where Indiana goes because they were up to number 5, and people were questioning how good they were. I think they deserve to be in the 12-team playoff, but whether they get there, nobody knows. But what a hell of a statement last night Saturday by Ohio State. They basically just put the clamps on one of the premier top offenses in the league. In the nation, excuse me. I was thinking of this league. Now to Kansas. This was Kansas just bum rushing the Colorado Buffaloes, of course, led by the head coach, the standout all-time great baseball player, Deion Sanders. That's not the issue. The issue is there was a cheap shot by Dean Miller, one of the most blatant cheap shots I've ever seen, when he intentionally and blatantly, with malicious intent and evil intent, to take out Shedeur Sanders with that cheap shot right directly on the knees. They apparently threw the flag, but they picked it up. I've never seen a more blatant cheap shot like that in a long, long time. I mean, that was an attempt to injure with vicious intent, with evil intent. I've never seen anyone with that kind of intent. To do something like that. Now I get it. Shedeur Sanders carries himself as a bunch of expletives in the world. I mean, I agree with that. I'm not the biggest Shedeur Sanders fan, but it does not excuse the fact that you went blatantly and just went for his knees to try and take him out and to do some permanent harm to his ligaments or something, because it was direct to the knees. I mean, they basically outlawed that under roughing the passer. Sending back to the NFL back in 2006, when Carson Palmer got injured or hurt intentionally by the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, that was the definition of a malicious intent to permanently harm someone, the way Dean Miller did to Shedeur Sanders that night. That was just absolutely uncalled for. It sort of puts a damper on what was really the most impressive win for Kansas University all year long. Big statement by them to knock off a hot team in Colorado. But maybe the best quote came from Deion Sanders after the game. We had the ball and we fumbled it. I mean, they had a chance to do something, maybe put themselves in the college playoff in the next rankings, but they just basically laid an egg at Arrowhead against Kansas University. They played at the Arrowhead Stadium, where the Chiefs played, from my understanding. But still, it didn't help the fact that was one of the most blatant cheap shots I've ever seen with an intent to hurt someone by Dean Miller. I mean, maybe something, I don't know how college goes with something like that, but if it was the NFL, the guy probably be sitting a couple games as well he should. That's just nasty, evil, disgusting, and disgraceful. Another big one, because I talked about this with a couple people who I podcasted with from Arizona a couple weeks ago. It was Arizona shocking BYU. I did not see this one coming, but kudos to Cam Skadebo, who just absolutely ran wild with 3 touchdowns. I mean, Cam Skadebo is him. I mean, the way Arizona just state fans just blizzarded the field, shocking BYU. I mean, big win for that university. Probably the biggest one they had in quite some time. I mean, BYU had no answer for Cam Skadebo, who just absolutely turned it up, let loose, ran wild, did anything and everything he wanted. One of the better running backs in the nation. Of course, everybody knows Alshon Jeffrey from Boise State's probably going to be the top running back picked in this year's in the 2025 NFL draft. But what a performance by Cam Skadebo, and big win for the Arizona State University Sun Devils. And of course, a shocker in Oklahoma, where Oklahoma just dog walked Alabama from start to finish. I mean, I try to be on the Jalen Milroe bandwagon, but he laid an egg in Soonertown. Kudos to Oklahoma on a big win. It's a great weekend of college football. Going to be interesting to see the college football rankings come out. I still think the top 3 are going to be Oklahoma, Oregon, Ohio State, and Texas. After that, all bets are off. Now, one of my favorite things I like to do is put things in historical perspective in a lot of sports. But today was a bit of a landmark moment. I don't know if it was today or whatever this weekend was, but 30 years ago today, at the Meadowlands in New Jersey, maybe play known as the two words, fake spike. I mean, every play has its own in the NFL. You have the catch, of course, you had the interception, of course, the immaculate, reception way back when with Franco Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was 30 years ago today at the New Jersey Meadowlands where we was introduced to what's called the fake spike by one of the premier quarterbacks ever, the great Dan Marino. It was the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets on a Sunday afternoon matinee where it was basically seen across the nation. Dan Marino, Boomer Esiason of the Jets had a great quarterback duel, great game back and forth. Of course, with a chance to drive a score, go for the touchdown, it was Dan Marino with the ball last, just driving down the field. Of course, he completes a pass before this happens. It's like first and goal inside the 5. Marino motions to everyone thinking he's going to spike the ball as they do in closing situations. So what happens? They snap the ball. Marino fakes the spike, looks to his right. Irving Fryer on man coverage. Marino throws a perfect pass on the fade route while everyone has stopped thinking Dan Marino had the fake. Throws a pass to Irving Fryer, almost like a fade route on man coverage, one-on-one. Fryer out jumps the cornerback, gets the game, turned out to be the game-winning touchdown. All-time quarterbacks, I've always said, all are unique. I don't like to use the word talent because they all have it. Everyone in in the NFL and the football and the sports communities throw that word out way, way, way too loosely. You could legitimately argue that word fits perfectly to the great Dan Marino. I mean, let me remind you, in 1985, he threw for 5,084 yards in a season. At a time when, you passed for 5,000 yards in those days, you were basically the GOAT. I mean, this is before all these rule changes where the offense has now become so pass happy. Dan Marino, for that time, you just say Dan Marino was way ahead of his time because he was always, the perfect example of a quarterback who sits in the pocket, surveys the field very well, watches the field, sees everything, and has a fast release when he just zips the ball out of his hands, almost like a beam that comes out. And Dan Marino finds a way to get the game-winning touchdown, as he did here. Kudos to him for that day. I said all along, not the greatest ever because it's too much too complex, but I'll tell you this much. Dan Marino was one of a kind back then because Dan Marino was absolutely sensational. And what he did 30 years ago today with that fake spike stood out more than anything else. That takes care of that. And my favorite part, because for my fight followers out there, I see your comments. I'm not going to give you the time of day for it. This is, we talk about two words in all kinds of sports. I talked about fake spike. Maybe the two famous words that took place 44 years ago in New Orleans, Louisiana, was no mas. Yeah, we're talking about the rematch between Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard. This fight, Duran and Leonard, was a rematch of what took place in Montreal back in 1980, where basically Roberto Duran, taunted Ray Leonard, suckered him into having Leonard fight his fight, and basically Leonard bit the bait and basically dug himself a hole, finally figured Duran out before that fight ended. Here's the thing. After that win, it was probably the best and the worst thing that ever happened to Duran, because the best thing that happened to him was he extended to a different level, all-time great. But the worst thing was that he got caught in the trappings of success, being surrounded by guys like Carlos Aleta and Don King, and it basically bit him. And guess who knew it? Sugar Ray Leonard. He did not just want the rematch. He wanted the rematch quickly, knowing Duran was absolutely was known for partying, was known for speak the word on this, living a edgy lifestyle, which is filled with a whole bunch of basically extra meals. It was well documented in the documentary The Kings. Leonard wanted the rematch knowing this was going to happen. And they apparently, King and Aleta carved out a ridiculous amount of money without Duran knowing, basically said, you're going to have a rematch. Basically, caught Duran off guard, basically calling him crazy because Duran basically said in his face, "I'm not ready." What happened when they said they weren't ready? Roberto Duran basically apparently had a weight cut to 147 just to make the weight, supposedly, and Sugar Ray Leonard knew it. And of course, they go to the ring in New Orleans, Louisiana. Singing the national anthem was Ray Charles, which is the namesake of Ray Leonard. His real name was Ray Charles Leonard. Of course, it was revealed that Ray Charles said to Ray Leonard, basically kick his expletive. The difference between this last fight and this fight was Sugar Ray Leonard knew what he was getting into, and he was not going to get suckered in a second time. He basically went back to being Sugar Ray Leonard, the flamboyant style with the 80s style hair fro, basically covered the size of the screen right now. The gorgeous smile, using his speed, his reflexes, the ring generalship, and basically took advantage of the fact that Sugar Ray Leonard simply was, if I could use this word of a better term, just basically just styling and profiling that particular night. And of course, after round 5, he started to taunt Roberto Duran and basically just made Duran angry. It's a case of making Duran miss and making him pay. And of course, we fast forward to the 8th round, where basically Duran just waved, turned to the side. Leonard throws a one punch to the back and a second one to the midsection. And Duran says this again and basically says, "No mas." And now here come the excuses. I mean, what can you say? Which is going to divulge to my Sirhan 6, the 6-minute fame here in a minute. It's going to be about Roberto Duran's, theories of no mas. Of course, everybody's asking every question in the book, from the networks to the fighters to even members of the management team. I remember the interview Howard Cosell gave to Duran's trainer, Ray Arcel, and it broke Ray Arcel. He was about to literally break down and cry. He basically could not come up with words to say to Roberto Duran simply because he had no answer. Nobody knew what the answer was. Okay, I had stomach cramps. Okay, I overate. What can you say? I mean, his manager, Luis Hernandez, said it best. Nothing really happened. The guy just quit. I mean, as dazzling as Ray Leonard was, the focus became Roberto Duran and why he quit. So, I mean, much love to Roberto Duran, but I'll get to him in a second. But for Ray Leonard, everybody knows the story with him. A year later, he regains his belt. A year later, he adds the 2-belt World Undisputed Championship, beats Thomas Hearns in that great fight, September 16, 1981. Detached retina, beats Marvin Hagler 6 years later. Beat with, hotly disputed to this day. Comes back 19 months later to shock Donnie Lalonde to win a higher level belt. And basically, he goes on and basically just... So he had the 2 embarrassing losses to Terry Norris in 91 and Hector Camacho in 97, and that was it. For Duran, it's been well chronicled. Took a long while for him to get over no mas because his home country just threw him under the bus. Roberto Duran, he had to get a lion, had to walk outside with a lion because he felt unsafe in Panama. I mean, basically everyone in Panama was betting everything they had, from their cars to their houses. Whatever you wanted to bet on Roberto Duran, that's what you got. You bet everything on Roberto Duran to beat Sugar Ray Leonard again because he won the first fight. And Roberto Duran lays an egg and says no mas. So, I said all along, it's about the machismo Duran. I'm going to touch that here in a couple seconds. But like Leonard, continue on way too long. He did win a title from Davey Moore. Gave Marvin Hagler the toughest fight of his career. Was just wasted in 2 rounds by Thomas Hearns. Iran Barkley in a face first, all out in your, stand in front of you, rock'em sock'em robots fight in 1989. And basically, after that, just started to slowly fade. Career dried down longer than it should, just largely because, of course, it was later revealed Carlos Aleta and Don Keene didn't pay his taxes, and he was wanted by the IRS. So he basically had to fight just because he had to avoid going to prison. Of course, the real end for him came in 1998 when he had an undeserved title shot against William Jopping. Was just overwhelmed in 3 rounds. And of course, I should say, Leonard and Duran had the 3rd fight in 1989 where Leonard just dog-walked Duran. And I will tell you this, Leonard and the 3rd fight had no business taking place because both guys were past their expiration dates. But their first two fights were basically historic in two different ways and many different ways you want to put it. Now I get to the edition of what I like to call the Sirhan 6. I'm going to give 6 minutes on a topic that I need to share with you all while I'm on my mind. And it is, of course, the theory of no mas of Roberto Duran to help try to understand this. For my fight followers out here, you guys know this as much as I do. Roberto Duran and all these Latino fighters have this, actually all fighters have this machismo where when something like this happens, they don't have it in them to reveal it. I mean, every time somebody loses, you come with an excuse. Oh, okay, I didn't eat right for 2 days. I had to lose 5 pounds. I couldn't eat right. Oh, okay, I missed 2 weeks of sparring because I couldn't get out of bed the right way. Oh, okay, I missed 3 weeks of sparring because 3 weeks of training camp because my ass was too big. I couldn't get out of bed. It's excuse after excuse after excuse. 44 years later, Roberto Duran's still making excuses for this. Why he said no mas. Because Sugar Ray Leonard didn't want to fight me, because he had, he partied too hard, because he had stomach cramps, because he had one too many steaks. Apparently, he was seen at some, high profile restaurant in Panama, cutting steaks and eating it. It's amazing to me why he still, 40 some odd years later, still wants to defend this, make excuses day in and day out for the fact that Roberto Duran wants to say the things he says and make it, talk about this. Look, I've been as great of a Roberto Duran fan as a lot of you guys out there. I mean, what can you say? A lot of people say this diminishes his legacy. Let me remind you, his legacy was before this, when he basically wiped out the lightweight division. I probably sent it to a top 5 all-time great lightweight. Moved up to welterweight and beat Leonard the first time, and basically that was it. So basically his legacy was intact after he beat Leonard. Maybe you could say it carried on with him longer than it should. What didn't help Roberto Duran when he tries to answer this is everybody out here in the boxing community wants to throw it in his face when they talk about no mas, simply because no mas was simply on the top of everybody's mind. Of course, there was an ESPN documentary a few years ago put together by Eric Draft that had Randy Gordon and a bunch of others still asking why did Roberto Duran quit in regards to this fight. Of course, they had Sugar Ray Leonard fly to Panama to meet Roberto Duran, and of course they met at the Duran de Roberto Stadium, which is the Roberto Duran Stadium out there in Panama City. And basically, Sugar Ray Leonard wanted answers to what happened that day, because when they talk about this particular fight 44 years ago, it's talked about as no mas. Why Roberto Duran quit, not why Sugar Ray Leonard gave the boxing lesson, because that's what he did for about 7.5 rounds. Basically, Leonard's still looking for answers. Duran basically just said to Ray Leonard, "You're an all-time great. We're not, don't let it bother you. We're going to move on." Let me just say this. Maybe, maybe when we look at revisionist history, maybe take it as a center, isolated from everything else. Just the fact that he said this. What did it mean at the end of the day? I mean, he quit. Well, I mean, that's all there is to it. Does it make him a quitter every single which way possible? No. I mean, he's not the only one that said no mas. I mean, I can point to a lot of times where people, other fighters said no mas who had as high a stature or close to as high a stature as he has. I mean, history's sensitive. I mean, these fighters are human beings, right? I mean, the fight community for the longest time as I've been in it, and I've been in it for a long, long time. We get so suckered into action, suckered into machismo, suckered into a bunch of things when it comes to the sport, and not appreciate the true elegance of it. I mean, just because a guy comes forward, gives and takes, because they have some of this machismo, approach to the sport, like especially for the some of the foreign and Latin American fighters, from guys like Duran, Chavez, Barrera, Morales, Canelo Alvarez, Wilfredo Gomez, Wilfredo Benitez. Maybe we need to just appreciate what these guys bring to the ring, because they're putting their bodies and their lives on the line. I mean, Of course, this looks bad. The whole situation looks bad when you look at the camera of it when it comes to Roberto Duran. But in the big picture of things, I mean, is this all you want to remember him by? I mean, we people get so crazy in recency bias. They don't understand the big picture and understand how it got to this point. It basically got to this point because Roberto Duran got to that apex and basically got caught in the trappings of success, and his opponent Sugar Ray Leonard saw it, he knew it, and he wanted to jump at the opportunity to get back what he lost in Montreal 9 months before, which is his welterweight championship, and he did it. Maybe instead of focusing on Roberto Duran losing the belt, maybe focus on how Sugar Ray Leonard made Roberto Duran quit, because that's what it was. Was Roberto Duran still an all-time great, isn't he? You gotta make it sound like he's not. For the longest time after he quit, a lot of people sounded like he's not. I'm telling you, I love some Roberto Duran. I've always have, always will. Because I will say this from the get-go. I mean, top 5 all-time great lightweight, probably the greatest Latino fighter of all time. We consider the depth of lightweight history. But, are we going to remember, if you're going to remember Roberto Duran with this, is that how you really want to remember him by? Because you seem like you guys don't want to do the actual research on some of this and see what led to this point or how he got to this point. Because if you're saying this, what does it say for Sugar Ray Leonard? Because you're basically, if you're going to take down Roberto Duran like this, you're basically taking down Sugar Ray Leonard. Because Sugar Ray Leonard needed this rematch and win this rematch real quick, just so he can go back to, so he can achieve the fights he had with Hearns, Hagler, Lalonde, among many others. Because we're not talking about Sugar Ray Leonard as an all-time great if he doesn't get this revenge on Roberto Duran. I mean, there's a lot of big picture things that's been missed for about 4 decades. Maybe it's time for everyone needs to stop and just leave it be. Same thing for Roberto Duran. Stop with the excuses at this point. You're an all-time great. Everybody loves you, including Sugar Ray Leonard, who's called you a friend for the longest time. Just move on. No need to answer yourself about no mas anymore. I mean, no mas is basically no mas at this point. It's done 44 years ago. But that's it. Leonard and Duran, 2 of the premier all-time greats. Duran, the fighter of the 70s. Leonard, the fighter of the 80s. When they met, basically, it was a clash of the Titans. What can you say? And that will wrap it up. Another edition of Sirhan on X. My live stream's done a little frankly. I got some of your comments. I will probably read them afterwards. I do apologize. I've been sort of flaky with my Wi-Fi as of late. I've been getting some weird phone calls. But I will be back tomorrow night. I will sit back and enjoy the Monday night tilt between Baltimore and Los Angeles. And I hope everyone out there has themselves a wonderful, blessed day. Good night. Take care of yourselves, and God bless.